Here's some awkward Earl but high CHA player advice. Similarly, the way I played with one DM is we never said I roll to anything. We just rooked, and if there was a component of luck or skill he would tell us to roll something. Let's go inside. A large guard blocks your way. I slink up to him and bat my eyes. I say, "Hey big boy, you think me and my friends could come in for a drinky poo?" Your half-orc barbarian named Cletus does this. Yes. Roll. Performance. 18. To your surprise, he seems extremely interested. He still doesn't let you in though. Less talked about point is how this should work in reverse. If a player is super charismatic Earl, but they have zero charm their character while maxing other stats, then they don't get to overcome rolls just because they play their non-charismatic characters as themselves. They are playing an RPG with a character whose awkwardness limits their interactions, and they need to play it as such, dealing with the reality of that. Otherwise a charismatic person Earl can max other stats while never really dealing with the consequences of having low char in the game. Unless the attempt is ridiculous and they aren't backing down. Honestly, ridiculous attempts deserve some love too. Case in point, in the first episode of Exandria Unlimited, minor spoiler, the bard was trying to impress the barmaid with his flute playing. Roll shit. Another player's character reacted immediately with, "Wait, you have to put honey on your flute to make it sweeter." But I like this suggestion. Not all of us are great at coming up with good lines, but we can describe a strategy and it could vary depending on the character. I imagine a sorcerer blasting lightning between his hands in Egg-Shen fashion. If you don't know, Google it then watch the movie, would be pretty intimidating. As a DM, high charisma characters who are a little awkward in real life are my favorite players. Also, high charisma doesn't mean not awkward. A lot of celebrities are super weird but still charming. Sometimes being awkward is their whole thing. Like Michael Cera for example. My high-char human warlock is an absolute asshole, sometimes unintentionally. He bumblefucked his way into the good graces of an orc tribe because he's grumpy and short-tempered. Like the orcs. High-char rolls looks like him being prone to outbursts and fist fights, which has earned him a lot of respect, considering he doesn't lose the fights. He's a fighter/warlock. If a DM is forcing you to only use active approach, that's a bad DM. Just to be clear, a DM that has expectations for a table of active role players is not a bad DM if those expectations are clear. No one is entitled to sit at any particular table, and a group of active players are going to be pretty disappointed when it turns out their bard is a passive player. Had something similar happen. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but the player completely misread the NPC's desires and goals. It would be like telling a homosexual male how many women he could seduce, if only they stuck around. Great sales pitch, but for something the guy doesn't need or want. Fair to note this exists in the book, but how many of us learn through playing and mostly read the PHB for races/classes/stats/etc. Speak for yourself. I have read the PHB cover to cover a couple times, also both Eberron books. Yeah, I'm sure there are a number of people who have, but I'd wager good money that the majority of D&D players haven't gone beyond what they needed to build a character. I'd also guess with D&D Beyond and other online tools a fair number haven't even gone that far into the physical book. And this is why for social situations, it's much better to go with fortune in the beginning. Roll first, then think of what the result would mean for your character. It could go either way. Like, if you have a super compelling argument, not as in, you need to be a good orator in real life, but there is a good reason in game that the NPC would listen to and agree with your PC, then rolling first doesn't solve the problem either. Sorry, you rolled a 1. I guess you can't make that compelling argument. As with everything in this game, all situational dependent, and sometimes you need to take a hybrid approach. Sometimes your argument should give advantage, or disadvantage even, and therefore you need to make the argument before you roll. Sometimes, you need to roll before, because whatever the argument is matters way less than the way the PC presents it. Maybe there's something a player has thought of that the DM didn't consider, and it turns out that a roll isn't necessary because whatever the PC says just makes too much sense. But if you roll first, then bringing up that point after doesn't matter. A cure for lazy entitled players across the globe. Thank you. Why entitled and lazy? Because saying I roll to persuade/deceive/intimidate and refusing to even mention how you go about it makes me as a DM feel like they don't care about what's going on. I once had a player say I want to intimidate the orc, so I ail him what he said to the orc, so I could roleplay a proper response, and he said I'm tired. Apparently he had gotten up to make food, and just clearly wasn't invested. I didn't let him make the roll. There are a few things to unpack here. Some players prefer describing actions in the third person, and others prefer to act this out. So when the player says I want to intimidate the orc, the DM should ask how. The player might act it out, and that's cool. But also the player might describe it in the third person, and that's also cool. Now if the player continues say I don't know, I'm tired, then that's where your job as a DM to ask, are you alright? Do you need a break? Remember, part of being a DM is not making the players play how you want to play, but making sure that everyone is having fun. You are right. No player should ever start a sentence with, I roll to, or a question with, can I roll to? No. You can't. You have to describe what your character is doing, then the DM will call for a roll if necessary. I get confused while DMing when a player begins with, I want to, as well. I end up responding with something along the lines of, how do you want to do that? To me, saying you want to do something is not the same thing as describing the character doing that thing. I get that we all sometimes want to do things, but wanting to do them and actually doing them are different. Personally, I hold the belief D&D is a great way to rediscover oneself as a person in a safe environment. It's a great place to try out personality traits and other things you would never dare to attempt in a real-life situation. Things like being more impulsive, more assertive, or also acting more feminine or masculine. The way Op describes it are great training wheels for this, which I of course accept. However, I always encourage players to try and play it out. Let them know there are no negative consequences if he or she messes up, only bonuses for trying, like making them roll a 1d4, 1d6 to lower my intended DC, or even giving them advantage on a very convincing speech. In my opinion, this is a good starting point, but it does everyone a world of good to build those confidence muscles and at least keep trying to roleplay things out. I guarantee, even the most experienced roleplayers were at your stage of awkwardness at some point, so don't worry if you look silly now. We have a simple way of dealing with high stat-based skill checks when we as people don't have matching abilities IRL. Using your example. I attempt to seduce the dragon. Blah blah, rolling dice. The blah blah is not a stand-in, it's actual quote. If a player wants to make an effort to RP it, and expand, we'll give them a bonus, 6-person gaming group, 3 of us are GMs, but baseline, blah blah I roll dice is an acceptable answer. If you're fighting, you aren't expected to detail how you slash your sword. You aren't working out style points for how dazzling you are with your bow. Why is a stat check, a simple game mechanic, any different? We've been playing together in various campaigns for 30-ish years now, and are all in our 50s. To us, it's not about awkwardness, it's about furthering the story we're playing in. There are plenty of reasons this might fail, and it is critical that you allow it to happen by the dice, assuming you are the DM, and that if a 1+ skill plus bonus is below the DC, you still wouldn't want to have that above situation fail. So, tone was wrong, your character, unfortunately, said that very sarcastically. Or you accidentally used a word considered vulgar in this region. Or you used local slang from your home region, and the people here didn't quite follow. Or they were too focused on a booger dangling off your nose. Or you farted at just the wrong moment. And, I'll assume that you don't make people lift weights for athletics. Or roll around the room. Or swing a cardboard tube for their attack. Or go on a scavenger hunt to skip the investigation or perception roll. Or take a field trip to an animal shelter to see them practice handle animal instead of rolling. So why would you ever let them get away without a roll on a persuasion check? Or intimidate? If you do that, you devalue those skill points. You make it so there's no reason to put points there. And you'll make any player who does put points there without knowing you do that feel like they wasted a bunch of their character's purpose. If the Charisma 3 fighter with 0 points in persuasion at the table can seduce the barmaid better than 22 Charisma bard with plus 20 in a variety of buffs and 20 ranks of skill, because the fighter's player is better at talking, that's really discouraging to someone who is not great at talking, but wants to be in that role. The whole point of role-playing is to do things you can't do normally, the dice are there to allow for that. A good idea and description should only swing it so far, A+2, or maybe A+3. Similarly, a bad idea shouldn't necessarily tank A. Roll? Accidentally insulted the warlord, but you rolled well. I guess he loves it, and finds you funny. You can always come up with a reason for how the roll works out, and your game will often be more enjoyable for it. If you want to skip the rolls, and just run on improv skills, there are better games for that purpose. I suggest playing one. No, really, a lot of them are fantastic and a lot of fun. Or, at minimum, make sure everyone knows what your house rules are before they start. This is the main reason I let my players role-playing affect rolls. If they bring forth great arguments or make a great speech, I will reward it with advantage. If it's good enough, why even roll at that point? If a player has a great argument, and the NPC would have no reason to not agree, just throw in a success. Or have the roll determine just how successful it is, with the DC not determining success or failure, but instead degree of success. You have to at least give a general direction. Seducing someone should never be reduced to one roll. It's a complex, multi-step process. But gaining some measure of approval can happen with one roll, it's just a question of how. Do you compliment their looks? Do you tell a joke? Do you boast about your accomplishments? Then, do you ask them to dinner? Sidle up next to them in a seductive fashion. Mention the private room you've rented at the inn and see if they take the hint. Like, give a general idea of what you're talking about and what actions you take to get there. Don't just flatten it to one seduce check, that's not how talking to people works. Plus, it gives more room for certain approaches to work better on certain characters, and adds more depth to the player's options. Like, even if the player doesn't know where to start, the DM can give them a few options and have them pick, then describe the NPC's general response.
Hey adventurers and fellow Redditors, are you tired of hearing the same old battle music during your D&D sessions, or just looking for the perfect soundtrack for your next epic quest? Well, let me introduce you to Amazon Music Unlimited. With Amazon Music Unlimited, you get access to over 100 million songs, ad-free. That means whether you need an intense combat playlist, relaxing tunes for a tavern scene, or just something to vibe to while scrolling Reddit, we've got you covered. And it's not just about music, there are thousands of podcasts too. So if you need a break between campaigns, you can catch up on your favorite shows. Plus, there's the best part. If you sign up today, you can try it free for 30 days. No commitment, no hassle, just endless music and podcasts tailored to your taste. So whether you're crafting your next D&D campaign, painting minis, or just chilling with your party, make your soundtrack legendary with Amazon Music Unlimited. Hit the link below and start your free trial now because every adventure needs a killer soundtrack.
Most of the time I feel like a lot of those problems are based on a lack of communication. Either I didn't give the player enough information yet, or they didn't communicate with the party that they're going to try to fuck a dragon during a rescue mission because it is on their bucket list or something. Plus, if you're descriptive about what you're asking, then I don't have to lie to you in your response. I'd like to roll insight. Is a great example because there are way too many things you could be trying to be insightful of. I'm not going to try to go out of my way at all to mislead anyone, and normally I give way too much information based on roles. However, usually my party is pretty clear and there are so many ways to get the information, especially when you vary checks based on different stats. Do I feel this person is remorseful? As a DM looking at a char-based character, give me a charisma-based insight check. Especially if you toss in background in there. I've always scaled my char checks based on the performance of the player, e.a. a well-thought-out line might get a 15 DC when a poorly performed like or a declared action would get a 25. It's not that I'm looking for an amazing performance either, I just want the player to think about their approach, and act in character, even if the acting isn't convincing. The attempt is all that matters. I also make this fact clear to my players. They seem to like the system, and it encourages a lot more clever lines. That's poorly representing Op's stance, and I think you know that. Also, your definition of metagaming is way off, but I digress. Op is stating that you can in fact find a happy medium between just saying I do this and attempting to fumble your way through acting out something you are not naturally gifted in, by simply being more descriptive. If you do not wish to play with people who don't spend the entire session in first person, that's your call, and if you have a table that is able to do that, awesome. But for people who don't have a 10-foot pole up their ass, and just want more people to enjoy the hobby, this is pretty great advice that allows people to live out the fantasy of being something they're not, without stressing themselves out. Ones aren't automatic failures. Besides having modifiers, the role may not be targeted at what you think it is, or the DC is incredibly low because of prior actions and checks. Maybe you already succeeded with the speech. You may have persuaded the people listening to the speech, but the one represents bad luck in the sound system, cutting out the back half of the crowd so they don't hear it until much later, or everything went great but the government decided then that you had to be taken down. Maybe the racists got inspired to stop you before the dream becomes real, etc. Telling everyone what your character does and how he or she does it. The awkward folk tend to skip the how he or she does it part, which is probably why this post exists. So, seems like roleplay gatekeeping to me. If they don't want to roleplay, I don't care, so long as they're having fun. You do understand that roleplaying is referring to two different things here, right? Have you never played an online RPG? RPG does not imply that role-playing is the most important part, let alone by far. A good RPG could have little to no improv acting type role-playing. You don't have to act or do improv to play your character properly or create the story alongside the DM. This way of thinking is close-minded and extremist, to think it's either an improv club or a completely dry and bland dungeon crawler free of flavor or description. Also, you need to be more civil and respectful. You see a sentry. I roll to seduce. Oh, it's a natural 20. No such thing as a nat 20 crit for skill checks, FYI. A good player wouldn't say I roll to X, and a good DM would deem the DC for seducing a guard that otherwise shouldn't/wouldn't be seduced away from his post to be too high for the roll to even matter. On the other hand, if a certain NPC can be reasonably seduced by that particular PC, then there isn't a rule that says the player themselves have to be charismatic and seductive to succeed in their attempt. That's the whole damn point of RPG, you're playing a character, not yourself. Should you also be expected to lift a boulder IRL just so you're Goliath Barbarian? Does it in-game? Just because you personally like to cater to charismatic players and improv specialists doesn't mean everyone should play this way. Open-mindedness would go a long way, my friend. To be fair, I think Op's comment was about upgrading the use of passive voice. My character checks for traps, 17 is passive, but so is my character looks around for any more arrow slits or pressure plates, 9. The second case is just much more dynamic. Compare to, stand back, wizard name, I'll take the lead. Another hit from an arrow trap and we'll lose you. 21? Though I still agree, the concept isn't new. I also agree that barring extreme situations, a DM forcing you to upgrade your role-playing by using a more dynamic and descriptive passive voice would still be bad DMing. Seeking out such advice of your own volition, or through any agreement you came to with your group, always recommended. Agree with you 100%. I have a DM that is really great at encouraging the acting but will always accept the role regardless. I think there is a good balance between the DM pushing you a little bit and taking the explanation because it can help you with your Earl charisma too. D&D helped me in this way at least, and now I have some real skills for the real world. If the player doesn't know how to do something, but the character should, there should be a role for it, with minor description by the player imho. Otherwise it beats the point of a RPG. The thought behind this is, the RP should be rewarded, but lack of thereof should not be punished. I love this advice. You can apply this to any role honestly. Say that the barbarian tries to intimidate by going into full detail just how he will make his fist go up the guard's ass and out his mouth to claw out his eyes. The wizard tries to explain how to activate the relic by going into an exhaustively long tirade of the structure of magic rituals and how to apply them. What I think a few people aren't getting is that in being more descriptive with the intention allows the DM to make the consequences more fitting to the situation. For example, if the bard is trying to seduce the dragon by complimenting its hoard, a failure might make the dragon think the player is looking to steal it. I agree a lot but disagree on the how necessarily. The DM I play with, who is amazing by the way, generally will let you get away with asking to seduce the dragon. But if you provide nothing, it'll probably depend on the dragon, and usually be at disadvantage. If you give a full explanation of what you want to do, and his knowing of the dragon, is it egotistical, and susceptible to that, etc., you might get a fair roll at it. Yeah, tired of the I don't lift things IRL to perform a SDR check, so why should I do it for charisma? Because there are hundreds ways to do a CHA check. You tell your character what to do, and he attempts to do it. You tell how your character tries to persuade, and he does it in his most charismatic voice and reacts accordingly to social cues. And actually yes, sometimes I do need you to describe how you will try to push that rock away, cause the way you choose will determine the DC and the consequences. Why does everyone think high char means fucking everything is sight? Because if you had that kind of CHA, wouldn't you? But seriously, I just rolled up my first warlock, and while he's a bit of a plier, I see his CHA score giving him the ability to be convincing. You believe that he's the rich nobleman he's pretending to be, or that he looks fabulous in black leather with red trim, or that he's going to cut your throat when he makes a feint, when he's actually going to take out your legs. A Bladelock's skill at fighting has to come from the ability to convincingly threaten, goad, and fake their opponent. Yeah, you can roleplay stuff like this pretty easy until it's a 20-int wizard and you're more like 10-int. But that's what I'm saying. Writers do this all the time. It's called technobabble. NCIS is writing int 15 people when they have 4-int looking at you 2 people per keyboard scene. Alternately, you don't say I want to find the clues, you search a desk or shelves, you give a vehicle to the ends of getting a clue. Even I toss the room is at least an actual action, not just a goal. Ran into something a bit similar. Our warlock, with what I'm guessing is the criminal background, wanted to contact his source and find a fence. So he said, I'd like to inconspicuously contact my source to find a fence. DM, how do you go about that? Player above table, well, I'm not a criminal but my character X is, so how I'd find a fence. At this point I feel like you as a player can maybe ask for suggestions, and when they're given do just say, oh, I'll do that then, and end it. Then you start to RP the suggestion. We used to use the diplomacy filter. My player might say, I want to convince the captain of the guard to let us through the gate even though it's after dark, through my diplomacy filter. Okay, what do you say? Look, Mr. Gate Master, we promise not to do any bad stuff, just open the gate, okay? Roll it. And depending on the roll and results, I'd usually give them the translation of what they intended, to what they actually said. Poorly. Look, little Lord of the Gates, we're obviously not bandits here, just let us in. Well? Good Lord of the Gates, I understand it's not entirely good, but could you see your way to allowing us in? We're clearly no threat to you, and we'd really prefer to get a good night's sleep before we go talk to the mayor tomorrow. Hey, I could even put in a good word for you, if you want, about how excellent your judgment is in pursuit of your duties? So, just let us in, eh? One thing that way too many people miss, but that is obvious to some others, is that if you struggle with RP your ideas, maybe try to ground them a little bit more. Your characters are fictional characters, so they are often over the top, it makes sense. But if you struggle with RP that, stop doing it. Build characters that are more grounded in realistic behaviors and personalities. This doesn't mean to be boring, it means to not be the next purple tiefling with flamboyant personality, but a purple tiefling that speaks like a normal person but with special and alluring charm to it. Of course, it's up to debate with your GM, but this is honestly a perfectly working solution. How many people do you see IRL and in other stories being highly charismatic and persuasive just by being normal? Lots of them. They attract and command attention not because of a great sense of style or amazing personality, they do so through a sense of cool and magnetism. There are many ways people can be charismatic IRL. To expect players to be that superstar with witty personality and fast with words is just wrong to begin with, as that's not all there is to the concept of charisma. I had this conversation with someone on here before, but to me the issue is really the player being like, I wanna seduce the dragon, and thinking that should be enough. If you go that route, it's going to set up someone for disappointment. Because the player/DM never clarified the goal of the action, and they may have different intentions of the results. An action in this case by itself doesn't really do anything. One thing I picked up from Call of Cthulhu is as a player to think less about the actual action, outside combat, and just explain what you want to do. Let the DM decide the appropriate role, or as a player make a case for an unusual skill roll. For example, if you go, I want to try and convince the dragon to let us go. There are multiple paths to that, it doesn't have to be just seduction or a high CHA character. Off the top of my head, a character with high INT could use logic. To convince the dragon to let them go, a character with high WIS could use their expertise in body language/survival, gut instinct, to get a read the dragon and use that to convince them to let them go. I also think a DM asking what are you trying to accomplish is a good tool to help put them in this mindset. For example, seducing a king is probably not going to convince them to turn over their entire kingdom to the player, but it could have other benefits if it succeeds.
Hey adventurers! Today I'm super excited to share my thoughts on Keys from the Golden Vault, the thrilling new D&D sourcebook that's all about heists. If you're into clever planning, stealthy maneuvers, and daring escapes, this book is for you. What I love most is that it's packed with heist adventures for every level, so whether you're a new party or seasoned veterans, there's always a perfect challenge waiting. The artwork in this book? Absolutely stunning. It's not only vibrant in detail, but it's also incredibly inclusive, showcasing diverse characters and settings that truly reflect the world of D&D today. It makes it even more fun to dive into these scenarios with my group to have this beautiful book in hand. And let me tell you, running these heists with my tabletop crew has been an absolute blast. The creativity, the tension, the out-of-the-box thinking, it keeps everyone on their toes and coming back for more. So if you're looking to spice up your D&D sessions, Keys from the Golden Vault is a must-have. Trust me, you won't regret it. Now go plan that perfect heist. Link in the description. Just go to the description and click the link and buy the book.